What is human nature? It is one of some fundamental questions faced by all the people and all times. It generally means what we are born with and what we naturally tend to have. And then another related question of more importance and of more controversy is human nature good or evil? Are we born with a good heart or with an evil heart? For this question, China and the West disagree at the very beginning, which somehow predicts the differing paths these two civilizations would embark on in their later development. The conviction human nature is originally good is upheld by most Chinese throughout history, from ancient times till even today. The very origin of such a deep-rooted belief comes from Confucianism, especially teachings of Mencius, a staunch advocate for inborn goodness of human nature. He cites an incident that when a little boy is about to fall into a well, people around him would naturally feel tense and strained at that moment. Natural sympathy pours out of the heart, which is a strong evidence of inner goodness of human heart. From this, he goes forward that humans are born with this initial goodness in their hearts, which differentiates humans from animals and finally makes humans authentic human beings. From this case, we may perceive that without the feeling of commiseration, there is no authentic human being. That the same is true if somebody is without feeling of shame and dislike, namely of what is unrighteous, without feeling of modesty and complacence, or without discernment of right from wrong. The feeling of commiseration is the initial phase of human goodness. The feeling of shame and dislike is the initial phase of righteousness. The feeling of modesty and complacence is the initial phase of propriety. The discernment of right from wrong is the initial phase of wisdom. Everyone has these four initial phases, just as he has his four limbs. If someone having these four initial phases yet says that he cannot develop them, he harms himself. By means of his preaching, debating, and writing, his belief is gradually accepted by both the commoners and the authority. Such a positive understanding of human nature further lays down Chinese ethics, morals, and social order. On the other hand, Westerners of Christian belief are devoted to the belief human nature is evil. The sprout of evil human nature could be found as early as in Greek philosophy, which to some extent parallels with fall of Adam of Christianity and is eventually finalized as original sin by St. Augustine. Humans in Christianity are reduced to sinners with their hearts corrupted and defiled, looking forward to forgiveness and redemption of God. For example, in Mark, Jesus unambiguously explains to Pharisees, a sect of Jews, what comes out of the human heart. There is nothing that enters a man from outside which can defile him, but the things which comes out of him, those are the things that defile a man. That which comes out of the man, that defiles the man. For from within, out of the heart of man, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile the man. Doctrine of good human nature in China and doctrine of evil human nature in the West diverge at the start, and therefore give rise to a differing system of worldview and morality from China. Here, we are going to take a brief look at some of the important difference between these two theories. Where is this good or evil human nature from? Where are their origins? How fixed is human nature? What perceptions about life and the world are individuals in both cultures likely to harbor? And what impact would be exerted on social strategy of governance by the authority? First of all, distinctive origins of human nature. In China, human nature is connected and communicated with nature, a manifestation of nature. Man models himself after earth. Earth models itself after heaven. Heaven models itself after Tao, and the Tao models itself after its nature. Both in Confucianism and Taoism, nature is holy, perfect, and supreme good. Mankind is an integral part of nature. Therefore, our human nature originates and inherits from nature, and our goodness is connected with goodness of nature. As water naturally flows downwards, human nature gravitates toward goodness in its origin. However, in the West, human nature is corrupted and sinned from moments that Adam and Eve are tempted by Satan to take a bite at the apple from the tree of knowledge. Therefore, they choose by their free will to rebel against God. Evil in human nature is inherited through this original sin and passed down into all the forthcoming generations. Secondly, mutability of human nature, that is, whether human nature changes over time or lasts forever. In China, although we embrace the belief that human nature is good, human nature tends to change, and this change is triggered by surroundings. Very likely, human nature is polluted and corrupted by society, which is brimming with evils. In order not to be tempted, constant education, especially moral education, is essential to maintain and safeguard natural goodness in human nature. On the contrary, human nature in Western culture would never change by itself. That is, sin is inseparably built into humans, and evilness of human nature is incurable. Moral preaching, good works, and charitable donation would never clear up our sinning hearts and evil nature. Only by faith in God, humans can be pardoned and redeemed. But even this faith cannot negate or nullify the fact of the inner evil. Thirdly, differing outlooks of life, humanistic versus non-humanistic. Mencius concluded, since we all have these four initial phases, let us learn to give them all their development and completion. Although scholars in later generations dispute whether initial phases of goodness and orientation toward goodness or innate goodness is originally intended by Mencius. His and later Confucians' emphasis on inner efforts to achieve or sustain the eventual goodness, benevolence, righteousness, decorum, and wisdom is clearly spelled out. Confucianism attaches great importance to self-cultivation through constant reflection, contemplation, and retrospection, which is inspired by role model of sages and is polished by ethics and mores. This is an active, aspiring, and enterprising mental journey of gradually improving ourselves and approaching the goal just through our own efforts to nourish and develop our good human nature. Good-oriented human nature is the practice of perfect virtue from a man himself, or is it from others? A counter-question fully demonstrates a humanistic view of life of Confucius. Nonetheless, in the West, the immutability of evil human nature is immune from all human endeavors, unlikely to be bettered, enhanced, and perfected. Therefore, self-cultivation would not work its miracle in sinners. Only God, His love, and His grace could save fallen souls. Faith in God becomes the only path into redemption and paradise after death, which demands undivided belief, wholehearted devotion, and passive submission. Such a relatively pessimistic outlook on human nature and its incurability glorifies omnipotence of God and His grace, and on the other, ignores and even denies human competence and human initiatives on the other. Therefore, it is anti-humanistic. Finally, different concepts of governance, rule by morality versus rule by law. In China, it is presumed that morality is outward demonstration of inner goodness of individuals. Goodness is emanated out from inside to outside and further spread out from self to family, to states, and eventually to the whole universe. Individual himself or herself is the initiator and beginning of this process. Sprouts of goodness in human nature naturally orients people to good behaviors, which distinguishes humans from animals and further lays a solid foundation for a well-ordered and peaceful society. If they be led by virtue and the uniformity sought to be given them by the rules of propriety, they will have the sense of shame and moreover will become good. This assumption stresses that internal pursuits and aspiration for supreme goodness is the core, which is facilitated by morality and ethics. Then what is likely to happen if we follow Christian arguments with respect to human nature? What would corrupted humans do towards themselves and the society? The whole world lies in wickedness. Corrupted human nature would naturally engage humans in all sorts of strife and rapacity. And then society would plunge into chaos and turbulence if without forceful external restraints. Therefore, an effective and powerful system of rules and laws is expected to be enforced in order to coerce people to follow and obey. Otherwise, due punishments would fall on those disobedient. External supervision and deterrence of law is essential in such a thinning culture to a stable society. Therefore, law is strictly enforced, obeyed, and also respected. To such a commonplace but timeless question, human nature is good or evil, mainstream thoughts in China and the West choose totally opposite answers. Good human nature of Chinese culture supposes that mankind naturally possesses initial goodness and is enabled to cultivate it, nourish it, and develop it by constant inner efforts until ultimate goal, benevolence, righteousness, decorum, and wisdom is achieved. All men may become yaos and suns. This intrinsic orientation and motivation render morality and ethics effective and practical in social governance. However, evil of human nature triggered by original sin presumes that humans forever lose the ability to choose good over evil, to improve and to redeem themselves by their own endeavor. Therefore, a devout heart for God and a pious faith in His grace is the only way for redemption. The initial rules and laws laid out by God and later by state is a basic guarantee for a stable society. Despite of these conflicting starting points and later different orientations, it cannot be denied that ultimate aspirations for two civilizations are generally the same. Goal of goodness exemplified by Emperor Yao, Shun Yu, and Confucius in China, and by Christ in the West. They are respectively the perfect reincarnation of superb goodness.